Hi there, I'm Megan Jackson, and I'm a homeschooling mom of 3 boys. They're 12, 10, and 5. We love nature and exploring the outside. So come with me and we'll look at ways we can explore the 5 senses and improve and engage your kids in their nature studies.
So let's get started exploring nature with your 5 senses. First, we're going to talk about the importance of nature studies. Then, let's take a look at activities for exploring each of the 5 senses: sight, hearing, taste, smell, touch, and then finish up with some other considerations. Nature is important. I'm sure we can all agree on that. But have you considered that society is suffering a nature deficit? It's actually a real thing and you can look that up. Think about it though. When's the last time you saw kids riding to the park like you used to in your youth? Nowadays, everyone is locked up inside on screens or terrified to go out and leave their kids alone, or they accompany them everywhere. The whole world has changed and it's beginning to take notice. Nature is good for your health. Besides the fact that you get way more physical activity, there's more fresh air. The children are working on their gross motor skills, fine motor skills. There's a lot more vitamins. You need to be able to touch dirt in order to build up a better immune system. There's more problem solving going on. And children also work on their conservation skills because they're caring about the environment. They're in awe and wonder about what they see and they want to preserve that. Being out in nature also connects many subject areas together, often without even knowing. There's so much math going on because of all the patterns and sizes. There's art and language and your imagination. So I encourage you, everybody, to get out in nature a whole lot more than they already are. Let's look at some ideas of what you can actually do to explore sight. So I would love if you could create an object to look through. Now that could be binoculars or a magnifying glass or even a simple frame that you cut out of a paper plate. It gives you and your children a different view of the world, one that you sort of narrows your focus a little. Now your craft could be as complicated or as simple as you like. And the beauty of that is that it could be done by all ages at the same time. Another great idea is to create a nature journal. Again, you can go as simple as or as complicated as you wish. But a nature journal is a perfect way to keep a record of all your amazing adventures and all the great things that you find. You could staple a few pieces of paper together. You could do a watercolor painting for the front cover, or you could even purchase a notebook. Remember to bring some tools with you, a pocket microscope or magnifying glass. Again, it incorporates real tools and real science into it and gives your children a different view of what they're looking at. You could even have them in their nature journals compare or draw what an object looked like with your bare eyes and using the tool. Another great thing to do is to create a theme for your nature time. So if that's a walk or a hike or just getting outside, each time you go, have a different theme in mind. What I mean by that is maybe one time you're focusing more on color and you're looking for specific colors. You can even bring paint chips or whatever your focus is. If you're working with younger children and you're focusing on a certain letter of the week, then you could look for that letter in nature. It would be great if you could focus on a different theme of or a season. So there's different ways you could tailor your nature time to whatever you're studying, or just to switch it up. I encourage you to go to the same locations more than once in different seasons, different time of days, or again, focusing on a different theme. There is a lot of great animals who have wonderful eyesight. So take a look at those, look them up. Which animals have the best eyesight? Which animals have the worst eyesight? Which animals have no eyesight? And ask big questions. Ask the why. Why do they have this? What does that need to help them adapt in the world? And what about human eyes? How does ours relate to or compare? Another great thing about sight is to look at the effects of things. So look at the effects of the wind. Can you create a wind chime or a wind sock? Can you measure the wind? How do we know how it's windy? And this has to do with sight because you can see the effects. You can see the leaves rustling. You can see bubbles blowing. You could look at just streamers in the wind. So you can tie that to science, you can tie that to art, you can tie that to your observations and also writing that down. And of course there's other nature science that involve sight and nature. Rainbows are a good one. Looking at how light bends, or anything to do with light, of course, and the sun. You could look at shadows or solar clocks like sundials. So it sort of branches off. As soon as you think of one topic, a whole group of topics pop up. Even off the top of my head, if I think of light, then I think of photosynthesis. Why do my leaves change color during the year? Observations with your eyes. How do things grow, especially if you're growing a garden? You're writing down those observations. You could be measuring the things, the flowers that you're growing or the vegetables that you're growing. And another great idea is to go on a 5 senses scavenger hunt. You could go one time in a certain area and look at all 5 senses, or you could focus your adventure on one thing at a time and just explore sight if that's your focus for the time. So you could look for large and small. You could look for colorful, shiny, man-made objects, human-made objects, all sorts of things like that. And there's a sample scavenger hunt in the handout as well. So let's move on to hearing. There is so much to hear out in nature. So go on a hearing nature hunt. Listen for crunchy. Listen for loud. Listen for soft. Animal sounds. Bird sounds. Man-made sounds. All those great things you can listen for and compare them. A sound map is a lot of fun. So what you would do is stand in one place in your yard or at a park and put an X on a piece of paper where you're standing, and then use your ears to turn around or stand in one spot and put a label on your map in the direction that you hear other sounds and guess how far away they are. So that has to do a lot with listening carefully and then estimating which way the sound is coming from and how far away it is and what is that sound. So if you were in the middle of the page and you heard cars rumbling in the distance straight ahead of you, you would write cars, at the far edge of the page in front of your X. But you might hear a dog close by to the side. You might hear somebody else talking. You might hear birds. So put those X's all around. Now it would be really fun if you traded papers and went to see if somebody else could kind of locate generally the spot where you were standing. That would work really well at my house because we can hear our neighbor's fountain from their pond in the backyard, but you don't hear that in the front yard. So by putting that on the map, I could generally figure out that one of my boys was standing in the backyard when they were listening. Again, I encourage you to visit the same place at different times to compare the sounds that you hear. Most of us notice that the birds are louder first thing in the morning, usually 5 in the morning to wake you up. But you would also hear frogs at the pond at certain times of year rather than others. Listening out for bird calls and trying to identify them, you might be surprised that one of them is actually a squirrel and not a bird making so much noise. You could learn about local animals or animals with great hearing, animals with terrible hearing. What about the animals you see in the reserve or the park or the conservation area near you all the time? What noises do they actually make? Another great thing to do is to describe the sounds of each season. This is particularly interesting for a variety of different ages if you look at their answers. But if you say to yourself, what does spring sound like? And again, you could do that with all 5 senses, but yeah, thinking about what, like fall sounds like crunchy leaves. And a bunch of other things too. Honking geese because they're flying south. Explore sounds of weather and nature. So that would include the rain, hail. When we think about sound, there's a lot of science topics. You could be exploring why those things make sound. Anything that is making sound, go and dive deeper. As soon as you hit something that sounds that is interesting to you, or a fact that you don't know, that would be a great thing to write in your nature journal and go find out later. You could also explore music. So making a musical instrument, making a wind chime, exploring and finding out which rocks sound you could combine to make a mini keyboard out of rocks. Could you make a whole drum set out of different nature? And then have a party, make a band out of nature found objects that make musical instruments. You could try to imitate nature sounds, whether that's exotic animals, your favorite animals, or ones that you hear. If you can figure out some bird calls locally, you could try those out and see if they respond back to you, which would be really cool. And if you have a phone or a tape recorder, then you could even record some sounds too and play games. My children absolutely love this game. We get our walkie-talkies and they separate as far as they can, and one person makes sounds while the other person has to guess what that sound was. Now, if you're tying that into nature, you could bang on a tree and see if the other person can guess it. You could go near the rushing river without going in, obviously, and see if the other person can pick up the sound. And the final one was to play games such as hide and seek, and let them use their imaginations. So one could pretend that they're hiding from the hunter, but every so often they have to let out a little animal sound. Or if they're hiding, they have to hear the person coming, if they're crunching in the leaves. So that gives each person a role, if they're an animal or if they're a hunter or if they're, explorers trying to look for animals. Then you can take on that role, you can play hide and seek, you could play all sorts of imaginative games and really get into that. Exploring taste is delicious, and I have some cautions for you. Please make sure you know exactly what you're eating if you're taking it from nature. If you're not sure, then don't eat it, just to be on the safe side. Because foraging is a lot of fun, but you really need to make sure that you're 100% sure on what it is you're eating, as well as where you're taking food from, because with pollution and everything, you want to make sure, and pesticides, and you want to make sure that you're taking clean sources and washing them. But some fun things to do is to eat a rainbow. Whether that's going to the grocery store or the farmer's market, see if you can get one of each of the main colors. Growing your own food is so amazing. And we didn't get access to our community garden plot this year, so we're actually just growing our vegetables in big recycling bins, and it's working beautifully. So you don't have to go fancy. But have the children choose which vegetables, what time of year, how do I plant them, how long will I have to wait, and then record and be excited and get into it and watching them grow, having the kids take care of the food, and then learning how to prepare and eat it. I mentioned foraging. We are really big into herbs and foraging. So you could look around your yard and learn and research about how to use edible plants.
So I wanted to bring you outside for just a moment to show you how easy it is to forage for edible plants in your own backyard. In fact, while looking around my own property, I discovered over 30 edible plants within walking distance of our house. The easiest of which to notice is the dandelion there. You can use the petals, the leaves, the roots for so many different things. And right next to that is a clover, which is also edible and a lot of fun to pick. Plantain is one that we use often for a lot of herbs and creams. But no one ever seems to be able to discover it until somebody points it out in context. That's the broadleaf with the little stem sticking out the middle. Those are plantains. You'll often find them right around walkways and heavily trafficked areas. So be careful of where you're picking. Make sure that it's clean. Another easy to forage item would be raspberries and black raspberries. Those grow wild all over the place, along with mint. And you'd be surprised what other fun things you'll find if you get the kids outside in context and look around your yard.
Making smoothies is another great experiment, because then you could get a whole variety of fruits, even some vegetables, different ingredients. Make a day of it. Make a whole store, make a competition, whatever you want to do to get them exploring different taste combinations. Make little tiny samples, freeze them, make popsicles, add in some herbs. It's just a simple way and a tastier way to get them trying out new things. You could also taste ingredients like herbs and spices. Often when we are baking, my boys love to taste the individual ingredients, so just be careful how much they're tasting. But then you could look up, what does cinnamon actually look like? How does that grow? Go back to the source. When you see just the shaky spices in your cupboard, go back and show your kids how these things actually look like on the tree. What's the process? How do we get pepper? Where does it come from? And how does that get into my pepper mill? Same with salt. There's so many different types of salt you could look up. Making herbal teas is another fantastic way to get children connecting nature with taste, as well as all the healing properties that go with that. It's amazing how much God gave us to heal us without having to use man-made science and man-made medicines. So take all those things you foraged. You could use strawberry leaves, raspberry leaves, blackberry leaves, pine needles, a lot of different flowers, so even some herbs. And again, make different combinations. Learn how to dry the leaves. order some, go to a tea place and just try different samples. And if your children don't like the hot teas, you can also use one of those cold coffee infusers and make tea with that. Or turn your teas into popsicles and chill them. And again, I encourage you to try new foods. Go to the grocery store. I often have my kids pick out something new. And we discovered that they loved dragon fruit. My son was intrigued by it and wanted to grow a plant. He looked online as to how to start a dragon fruit plant from seed. He grew them, and he's also been selling them because his plant grew so well. He keeps going back on to learn about how to care for it. He said, oh my gosh, I've got these little shooty out sprout thingies. What do I do? He discovered you could cut them and replant them. So now he just made a whole ton of money because he was curious about the dragon fruit because it looked like a weird plant in the grocery store. So visit those farmers markets. Go to the you-pick places. Make a relationship with the farmers, and they'll often give you a great deal. I always buy my peppers from a certain farmer because he has them as seconds if they're lumpy and ugly. I don't care, I'm just cutting them up and eating them. We also made friends with the bee farmers, and at the end of the season when we went to go say goodbye and thank them, they gave us a little tray of honeycomb they had left over, which was a great treat because we had never actually bought honeycomb from them before. Another fun thing to do is to play with your food. Make some food art. Make little creatures. Make nature art. It's a lot of fun. Learn to cook. One night a week is one of my boys are in charge of making the meal for dinner. So learn to cook. Learn to try out those new flavors. If it calls for an ingredient you don't know of, look it up. Go find it. And of course, it would be great if you could find out what animals eat, especially when you're out foraging. Look for look for food that people could eat. Look for food that animals would be inclined to eat. Which animals have great taste? Which animals have poor sense of taste? How do humans compare? And you could also then look at the different areas of your tongue, because each part of your tongue tastes differently. And then you could do experiments with that. You could touch little cotton swabs dipped in lemon juice on different areas of your tongue to map that out yourself to see if that compares. Oh my gosh, I'm going to go on forever. There's so much you could do. Smell is a fun one. Go on a smelly scavenger hunt. Look for the best smells and the worst smells and the different smelling flowers. You could compare different nature objects to see, even within the same category. So gather a group of flowers or walk around if you don't want to pick the flowers and see if you can tell the difference between the different scents. Even with different pine trees. Snap them open and rub them on your hand to get the actual real good smell out of them, but compare them. You could even do a blind smell test from items around the house, different essential oils, different spices, and blindfold and see if people can guess what those are. Oranges, lemons, those have got good strong smells to them. Scented Play-Doh is another easy, hands-on, fun craft for kids to do. You could research animals with a great sense of smell. Again, why do they need that sense of smell? Where do they live? What's unique about their area? Which animals have terrible smell? And ask other smell-related questions. What is the worst smelling flower? What is the worst smelling animal? What is the best smelling animal or best smelling plant, and why? What does it need to do for that? How do smells affect us and our behavior or our moods? So there's, keep asking the questions. What intrigues you? Exploring nature with your sense of touch is messy, dirty, and so much fun. So go on that scavenger hunt again. Take your nature journal and write in it. Do some actual leaf rubbings, bark rubbings. Find prickly, soft, cold, wet, smooth. Go for a blindfold walk where one partner is blindfolded and the other person can only is guided, but with one hand is feeling their way around to guess where they are at the park or in your yard. So they'll have to notice the difference between, or even try barefoot if you want to, between the gravel and the grass. And oh, I'm near this tree, but I know that's my favorite tree, and so it feels like this. You could look at different tree barks and compare that a shaggy walnut tree is different than a maple tree and an oak tree, and birch trees are smoother. Gather items to guess and feel. Now you could do this blindfolded, you could put it in a box, but go around and pick up. See if they can notice the difference between the pine needles and some grass, or a pine cone, which would be a little more obvious. And of course, I encourage you to get into sand, get into water, get into mud. This will give you hours of fun with your children. Give them a hose and a bucket, give them some dirt. But that sensory feeling is so good for their bodies. And then there is so much exploring that happens, because they're going to look at how I can dig trenches between here and on the beach and the lake or the ocean. And there's a lot of engineering that goes into building sandcastles and moats and river systems. My boys do that at the beach. They dig around in the yard at home and they're making little ponds and rivers, and they notice that one substance holds up better than the other. So let them get hands-on as well. And if it's the wrong season, then bring some sensory play inside if you can. Of course, making a mud kitchen brings another element of creativity and imagination to that as well. And it can be really simple. Just bring out some bowls and buckets. You don't have to have an elaborate setup. And again, we're learning about animals too, which have a great sense of touch. Why do they need that? Which animals can suction cup? Which animals have defense systems? And not even animals that have a good sense of touch. Why do animals feel differently? And some of those answers are obvious and some are quite intriguing, but why are fish and dolphins and whales smooth? Well, obviously for us as adults, we know it's to cut through the water faster. But talking about texture of different animals. And when you are talking about sight, some of the animals can change colors, which is really cool. So some other considerations are multiple ages. Of course, all of these activities could be done by any age, even an adult, but their level of research, their level of inquiry and thought, it will be different. So you can redo all these activities more than one time in their lifetime, and with siblings or a co-op. If you're doing nature studies during inclement weather, winter, spring, summer, all whatever it is, dress appropriately, first of all, if you're going outside. And also, you could bring nature into you, whether that's through videos or books, or bring just a few objects in for a nature table. You could use art supplies to represent nature. So there's other ways of continuing on, even if you're not actually outside in nature. Bring it indoors. Get yourself a pocket microscope or a notebook. Use your iPhone. Get some books, some guides for your local area. Another fun idea for kids is to make their own survival kit. So if you're going on hikes during different times of years, look that up on Pinterest. It's quite simple. But if you're going out in the winter, you want to make sure you have some hand warmers, maybe a whistle, an extra snack packed, a bandana, a simple medical kit, all those things that they might want to be looking into. And stay safe and have fun. So there are poisonous plants. So learn about what poison ivy looks like. If you have poison oak or poison sumac in your area, Ticks are another big concern. So look up the safety that would be involved, as well as heat stroke and hypothermia. So those are great research projects for the kids. You don't have to be paranoid about it, but do take a look at what might be something that you need to look into with your family.
I hope you were able to find some great ideas to incorporate into your nature studies. I look forward to finding out how you get outside and explore nature with your 5 senses. I'm Megan Jackson, and I look forward to connecting with you.